Welcome back to the BookEnds YouTube channel. Today we're talking about us, which is always fun.
Really what we do best.
Yeah, I mean, kind of. So our video today is actually inspired a little bit by our list and like what we're going through on our side of building our list, right? So I have been working lately to make bigger presence in the adult market. So I feel like I'm very well known for picture books. I think that's what most people think of when they think of me. And I'm trying to expand beyond that into the illustrator space because I love working with illustrators, even though that's still picture book adjacent, but also the adult market. If you watch all of our recent reads, then you know that I read a lot of adult mystery, suspense, thriller, book club fiction. So that's a big goal for me. And so we decided we'd have a little conversation, me making, I think, my first big pivot of my career, and Jessica having made many pivots to kind of like talk us through what inspires an agent's pivot in general, or branching out or changing of their focus, and what goes into that. What are we thinking about? What are we doing? What are some effects of it? Things like that.
Yeah, and how this influences obviously our reading of queries, but also how truthfully you should just keep querying because you don't know. But I think sometimes when authors get a lot of rejections, there's that level of frustration of I don't know why, or this was exactly what was on the agent's list, or this or that, and how that can be constantly changing. I mean, even if I posted on Twitter X daily, it would be constantly changing. So we just want to give you some insights into how our heads work. And I guess we should apologize for that ahead of time because nobody should know how our heads work.
Fair. Well, I also think one of the things to keep in mind too, like a disclaimer before we get started, is just because an agent might be starting out in a new category doesn't mean like all of their old clients go. Like that is never really the case. And B, doesn't mean like all of their skill set and knowledge of the industry is starting from scratch. That's almost never the case. So there are differences between markets. Obviously, there are differences between editor pools of who you might submit to, but an agent will always sort of come to it with their skill set, with their knowledge of the industry, which I think makes a pivot easier.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So those were two disclaimers. It's not like someone starting from scratch as an agent, just might be building a new part of their list. And plenty of agents will make those changes. And it does not mean that if your agent is making a pivot, you're hitting the road.
No, in fact, years ago, I used to represent YA.
Yeah.
And then I took YA off my list on, the website and my query, but I still had YA authors. And it was interesting because I had an adult author who came to me and wanted me to know if they had written a YA and should I go find another agent because I looked on your website and you're not asking for YA. And I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Rules are different for clients.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So always know rules are different for clients. But let's actually stop me rambling. And why don't you explain a little bit about this decision you're making to expand your list in a bigger way into the adult market and what that means for your picture books, and then also what influenced you to make that decision?
Yeah. First of all, you're not rambling. It was very important disclaimers we had to make, or else someone would hate us. So,
Well, hate us anyway.
but yeah, so since I've started, a big part of my list has been picture books. Majority of my list, like maybe bigger than 75%, has been picture book authors. And in the past 2 or 3 years, I've branched into illustrators even more. So about 80% of my list is picture book authors or illustrators. But I personally have come to a point where I'm like, got a lot of really great clients that I love working with, but it would be fun to start something new, A, and B, it would not hurt to have a bit of a breather, right? Like we're always going to the same editors, we're always sort of sending it out to the same people or doing the same rigmarole. And I think what's really great about an agent's job is that we can customize it as much as possible and follow the things that we're excited about. And since I am a huge reader of adult and I've always wanted to have that adult list, the picture books just kind of happen. I always say you can't control your list, right? Like when I'm talking to a younger age or a newer agent or whatever, it's always like, yeah, you kind of just gotta let it go as it goes. And
It's what I say all the time. Like
yeah,
you can have this perfect vision for what your list is, but your
when I
list.
first started, Jessica will tell you, when I first started, I was like focused on YA and adult, and completely out of left field came the picture books. So now that I am at a place where I feel a lot more established as an agent, I have the luxury of being able to start something new and branch out. And I've always been looking for adult, but just never as what's the word? Like aggressively, I guess. I've never been doing it as concentrated as I want to be doing it. So yeah, that has been the change for me. Like now I've got all my picture book clients settled. They've all got really wonderful books coming out. Everyone has a book under their belt at this point, which I'm really proud of, and I get to do something different. So
Mhm.
that's the way I'm framing it. I get to do something different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny because I started my career in editorial, and when I switched over to agenting, a lot of the biggest question I always got was why? Like, what made you decide to become an agent? Why? And my number one reason was that as an agent, I get to do whatever I want. So when you work for a publishing house, you are locked into what that publishing house does. If you work for Harlequin category romance, you're only going to be doing romance. If you work for Wiley Publishing, you're only going to be doing nonfiction. And then even imprints. If I work at Penguin Random House, it doesn't mean I get to buy books as an editor across all imprints. I only buy for the imprint I'm working for. And that might be a mystery only imprint or a health books only imprint. Like I am locked into the job I am doing. But
Yeah.
as an agent, there's just this freedom to be able to explore all of my interests in books and be able to grow and change. Now, for me, I came from Berkeley Publishing, and actually Macmillan. So I have a very commercial fiction and nonfiction background. But over time, and I did very well in those books, and I had a very strong romance background. So when I first started my career, I was really into the world of romance. I was involved in RWA, and I had a huge romance list. And over time, I realized I really just didn't think I was that good at romance. And no, I have wonderful authors, and I did some amazing things, but it never felt like my superpower, especially when I was up against Kim and Jessica Alvarez and we were going together. I'm like, they knew this stuff in a way I didn't think I ever would. And so over time, as my career grew, I just sort of naturally moved away from romance and continued to work with those authors I was working with, but started taking on projects that were more in line with what I was then reading, which were more thrillers, more upmarket fiction. And really, as my reading taste changed, so did my list.
Yeah,
But
naturally. But
um,
also, and you mentioned it too, like especially with nonfiction, where you are in your life changes. Like you at a point might have been really into like a parenting book, and then really into like a
right.
entrepreneurial book, and then really so like there's so many different influences on where you start out and how your list ends up taking on this life of its own. Like and the market too, the feedback
Yep.
of the market. If you sell 3 romance books right out the bat, you're like, I gotta go and get me some more romance because
Right.
clearly I got a knack for it or it's working for me or that's what the market wants right now.
But that's also where your network is.
Yeah,
When
yeah,
you
for sure.
start selling books, you start really strengthening that network. And then you
And
want to keep building that network.
and you have built a reputation too. So like it's almost I'm not saying they get easier, but a little bit like the offer
Yeah.
calls get a little easier
Yeah.
because you're not it's not like really trying to prove yourself a ton because you have a list and you have sales and you have clients at your back that are like, I did that and now I could do this. So it does like kind of snowball in a way where you're
Mhm.
like, all right, I'm gonna do this one thing, and then suddenly that's your whole list.
But to your point about the market, is the market changes too.
Oh, yeah, it's
And
living.
yeah. And so if I have a strong, well, so for many, many years, I had BookEnds was sort of the agency for cozy mysteries. And I literally have 2 walls of cozy mysteries.
It's kind of crazy when you think
It's
about it.
crazy, like hundreds. Like I have individual authors who've done somewhere between 20 and 50 books. So we have
But,
literally, as an agency, done hundreds of cozy mysteries.
yeah.
Um, but the market changed. And my clients changed. Some of them are still writing cozies. They're doing great. Some of them have stopped writing. Some of them switched and are doing different things and their writing has evolved. But the market has changed and I am not doing nearly the cozies I was doing back then. But I also have to, for my career, be constantly mindful of what that market is because if my entire list right now was still writing a certain kind of book that doesn't have a market for it, I'm going to lose not just, my ability to sell books, but also I'm going to lose my network and all of these other things that I've built up as an agent that supports all of my clients because I have not adapted to the market as well.
Yeah,
That's really important for me to do.
and to be frank too, it's income. So like as agents who work off commission, a lot of it, like I just said, is a snowball effect, right? So
Yeah.
the more you sell, the more money you get. And if at some point you're not listening to the market or listening to where your clients are going or listening to what you want to do too, like following what is working and what you're excited about, you'll see the snowball start to melt. Like it will. That's just natural. But I think to your point about the market changing, cozy mysteries are the best example because there was a point where they were huge, right? Like they were selling, BookEnds has clearly sold hundreds of them, and they were all coming out in like a mass market format. And then we started to see them, I'm just gonna make a mess. I'm not even gonna think about it. But then we started to see them come out in a paperback format. And now I feel like the definition of cozy has kind of changed a little bit to where
It
it's
has.
like these hardcover books that are a little more like bigger concept, like The Maid. So when you hear people say cozy mysteries, a lot of time now that's what they're referring to. So the
Yeah.
market is always alive and always changing, and it is our job to understand, listen to, and respond to that as almost as swiftly as possible.
But also for our clients.
Yeah.
When we start to see those market changes is when I am having the conversations with my clients 2 years ago now about the market's changing, we need to adapt to that. And so sometimes an agent's list takes on a change just because it's following their clients.
Yeah.
Like if that market changes. Years and years ago, I did a ton of erotic romance, a ton. And one of my authors actually helped launch the entire erotic romance line at Kensington. And I was doing, there were months at that line at Kensington where I had every author in that month's list. And that market really did very well for a few years. And then you could see the sales started to ebb and things started to change. And I was having conversations with my clients about what changes are we going to make? What are we going to do? We could sell another book, but your sales are declining. So we've got to go in another direction. And then naturally, my list started to make that shift as well, not just because I started to make the shift with the list I was with the clients, but my clients started to make the shift.
Yeah. I think there's two different kinds of shifts that happen too. I think there's a kind of shift where you start and you're open to a whole bunch of different things, and you might take on a whole lot in this basket, and then you take on a whole lot in this basket, and then you take on a whole, and like there's that kind of natural ebb and flow. There's also the more concerted shift where, like I'm doing, where I'm like, I've done this great thing and I always want to do that. Now I'm going to do that. So I think you have two different types of ways that it even happens in the first place.
Yeah, and it's interesting. So I was talking to somebody about this recently. So it might have been 3 to 5 years ago. It might have been about 5 years ago. I really realized that I wanted to move my list away from really straight mass market commercial fiction and started moving more in the direction of upmarket. So still doing a lot of mystery, but with a focus on more upmarket mystery, thriller, that kind of thing. And it was a real adjustment because, projects that I would normally have said yes to in Query Manager and clients I would have taken on, I was now saying no to because I felt similar to what you're doing. I felt like I already had a strong base in those areas, but since I wanted to make that shift, and it really impacted everything in my career, I had to really begin networking in a way with different editors. I had to make sure authors who maybe previously weren't querying me were querying me, and I had to rebuild my reputation within the same genre, but in a slight twist to it to get the attention of these authors and editors who may not have quite known me in the same way as the more commercial mass market editors and authors did.
Yeah. So just to recap that, like there are things that we have to do too. First of all, we have to read. We have to understand the market. In our opinion, this is what an agent should be doing. You have to be reading. Just like we tell authors all the time, read within the last couple of years. You want to read within the last couple of years, sort of match the book and the author to the editor and the publisher and understand who's publishing what. We have to rebuild a network or, expand a network or ask different questions of our network, because there might be an editor who does the cozies, but also does the romance. And then we have to ask the questions of that editor, like, what are you looking for in this space? You always talk to me about this space. So there are, and then we have to, like Jessica said, kind of put our name out there in a different way, in a different brand, and a different fashion, whether that's going to conferences, doing speaking engagements, posting on our YouTube channel, our social media, our new MSWL, sharing those deals when we do finally make them, sharing them loudly so that people see that we are selling that kind of book. So it's not just of our whim, we're just going to move over there and start fresh. It's concerted effort and work on our end in order to start to do that. I remember when Jessica Alvarez started. Jessica Alvarez is the romance person here from when I started. Like, she was the one doing all the romance, the Harlequin, everything, actively. And then she was like, I'm going to do nonfiction. And for me, I was like, I never expected that. And then she built such an exciting nonfiction list, but it was work. It was work of like understanding what goes into a submission. You would see Jessica Alvarez's name pop up all the time of all these different editors she was speaking to. So it's always going to be a lift on our end to start to make that pivot, I think.
No, I agree. It's interesting to do, and it makes it fun, but and there's definitely a lag.
Yeah.
You'll see where, you may have been consistently selling, but with that shift becomes a bit of a lag because you're looking for new clients in that space to be able to get out. And so that takes some time.
And sometimes it's not public either. Like, sometimes it's
it usually really isn't in a huge way, because even
Yeah.
if you post an MSWL, it only gives a peek of
Yeah,
what's really
we're just
happening.
always gabbing online. So of course for us it's public.
Right. It feels public anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, it also doesn't mean that people aren't looking for what they've done in the past. It just means sometimes you need some change for a variety of reasons.
Right.
And also, like you said, what we read really informs that. And also sometimes what we read also informs what we know we don't take on. I read a fair number of biographies, but I know flat off the bat, they're not books I'm going to ever represent. It's just not, that's two different takes for me. So there's that too.
Yeah, for sure. So on your end, I guess, just look at what the agent is posting on their MSWL. I always say go back to the agent's website. I think that's the best place to start.
Yeah, we have a number of people making some shifts right now. So
and I think
if you're looking for somebody you haven't submitted to yet, you might want to check out our website, because there's some people doing some different things here.
Yeah, and I think that's agency-wide. I'm not agency-wide. Well, it is agency-wide, but market-wide, like industry-wide. There you go. I think a lot of people are probably finding themselves trying to switch things up too. So yeah, so that's always the place to go. But this is helpful information, I think, for you to have when you are querying, just to know that there's a lot going on behind the scenes for any agent, whether they're making a conscious pivot or not. There's a lot that we're always considering. So we hope this was a fun peek behind the curtain. We hope it was helpful. If you have questions, put them in the comments below. Otherwise, don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you back here next week.
Bye.